Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of GTM in the Tofu Bowl. My guest today is Charlie Riley. He's the head of marketing for OneScreen.ai, dominating out of home, an area that I think a lot of marketers are really not thinking about. So thank you for joining, Charlie.
Thanks for having me, and that's a great intro. Dominating would be that would be ideal, but we're one marketer at a time. We'll take, but yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
I love it. Also, I saw you guys were doing a podcast called Beyond the Billboard. So my joke was I was going to start off being like, so out of home is just billboards, right? So what is what is out of home? How do people think about it that isn't just billboards?
That's a great question, and that's partially why we named it the podcast that. For a lot of marketers that have never done out of home before, it's so wide ranging that you're used to maybe seeing whatever your main throughway is. You see this huge 14 by 48 billboard of probably a local personal injury attorney, or maybe somebody like a healthcare plan. But it's way more than that. Out of home includes billboards. It includes static billboards, so the vinyl wrapped billboards you see like that. It includes digital out of home and digital billboards. So you'll see those rotating, the big, large billboards, but then you see some posters, and you see things like transit ads. So it encompasses anything, and really it's anything outside of what you see on maybe your computer screen or your phone. So it could be anything from experiential marketing, what you might think is like a PR play. So street teams, we work with brands that do street teams. We might wrap cars or buses, or and do handouts, or we'll do event, at conferences, we'll do some experiential marketing there. You can wrap up, you can have your brand on a blimp. You could pull an ad behind a plane. So, and one of our co-founders likes to joke, probably paraphrasing, but it's like anything that that floats, walks, drives, it's out of home. And so that also includes things like what you might see advertising inside of an Uber car as you're taking a ride somewhere, or even screens inside of a restaurant or bar. So the best part about out of home is there are so many options that someone can use. So if they've got a target audience, we work with them to figure out what the right mix is. There's so many vendors. We find the right mix, and it could include billboards, it could include transit ads, it could include a wrapped bus, it could include the sphere if they have enough money to do that. So it's very wide ranging and all encompassing.
The sphere would be sick. I still have never been there, but I would love, that would be so cool. That would cost a lot. I have an idea for you guys too. So maybe this is not even feasible. You can bring this back to your co-founders. During the peak pandemic, I live in San Francisco. I'm a big runner, and I was running around San Francisco, and it was dead. We shut down, and so many of the businesses were going under. And even then, even before that, there was just a lot of vacant commercial real estate sitting. And these are, call it restaurants, shops, that kind of stuff. The people who are on the hook for that lease are still paying a lot of money to own real estate in San Francisco. And it's just boarded up windows or empty spaces that don't even look nice. So here's the idea. I looked into the legality of this too. So I'll give you what I think is legal. The idea is to put out of home advertising on the inside of the windows of the vacant properties. Digital screens where you actually use data to understand how many impressions are you getting, so truly trackable. And you can buy weeks, so it's rotating, or it could not rotate, either way, but you're paying week by week. So if that space gets rented or leased, now all of a sudden, fine, it goes away. You can find additional properties. But as long as it's on the inside of the space, the tenant or the owner technically, I think, has permission to do whatever they want. What do you think about that?
I love the idea. I love that you put your legal hat on, because that's exactly where my mind went. There are 4 states in the U.S., and now I'm going to draw a blank on 2 of them, that don't allow certain out-of-home applications. So you're 100% right of how you're thinking about this, in that there's ways to pull that off. I think it's brilliant, because if you think about, you think about how to have out of home be impactful is it complements digital. It's there in the real world. You're having people like foot traffic, and you're referencing the pandemic. People are back. People are out. They're shopping. They're walking around, and it's a reinforcement of a brand. And in that sense, it's in the environment that they're spending time in. And I think the flexibility that you talked about is exactly why people gravitate towards digital out of home, because you do have flexibility to rotate ads. You have flexibility, like you said, if somebody rented out the space, you could change that up. So I think that's a brilliant idea. To bring life to maybe a dormant area or a dormant like retail scene. I think that's a great use case. I love it. I think you should, before this airs, you might want to trademark the idea, but that's a creative way to think about out of home. And that's where we see success, is when someone thinks about how do I do something different. And you mentioned San Francisco. We work with a lot of brands that like to advertise in San Francisco. Obviously their target market fits there. We've done some really cool things with Ramp, which is they've done excellent out of home in San Francisco. But one of the things that they did to launch a product in New York City was they did this huge billboard, huge wallscape on the side of a building, and they made it look like a part of the billboard fell out and smashed a Mercedes underneath it.
I saw that. That was so cool.
Did you see that? Yeah,
I did.
So that's a great, they could have just bought a billboard and it would have looked amazing, because their colors stand out. But to go experientially with another step and another layer there, that's when out of home really works. That's when people start sharing pictures on social. That's when people start talking about it. That's when the brand stands out beyond the billboard. So great idea. I think you can join our marketing team and help us come up with some product evolution here.
Amazing. And the experiential thing also really rings true to me. Those are the memorable campaigns. Those are the things that probably do move the needle. I think you can even do that with the idea I mentioned of doing something, again, inside of the space, but something that's much more experiential in different cities. That kind of brings me to the question I've always had, though, about out of home is, I think that most people think of out of home as the big brand bets that are impossible to measure. And I know you guys think of your company as very data driven. How are people measuring out of home? What is real? What is not actually real? I know attribution is hard for B2B marketers in general, but what is actually doable today?
Yeah, it all comes down to what a marketer's goal is. And they're all different. Sometimes it is a brand play. Sometimes or they're doing a big product launch and they want to look bigger, or they're doing a raise. They just secured a raise and they want to look bigger than maybe the brand is perceived. So it all really comes down to what the goals are. We've seen success with brands when they run an out of home campaign. They see a pretty significant lift in organic traffic, and that might be something that you don't think about. Why would that correlate to an out of home campaign? But if you're showing the right impressions in front of the right people, and that's how we build campaigns. We work with all the vendors. We are agnostic to what we choose. So we're going to find the best mix for the right exposure. We use hundreds of data sources to be able to figure out, if it's a retail brand, we can look at previous retail experience, who bought a certain brand in the last 30 days, and where can we find the right inventory to make sure that they see that. There are so many different ways that we can think about that. But yeah, going back to that example of, say, organic lift, it's because someone's been exposed to your brand enough. They're waiting till they get into a safe environment. We don't want somebody on their phone while they're driving, but when they get to a safe place, that's why you can't have QR codes on billboards, by the way, is because you don't want somebody to scan that and get into a car accident. But what they do is if and this is what we advise on, the creative, we make it simple, make it memorable, make it so that when someone is ready to buy, or they go back to their phone or they go back to their desk, they Google that brand right away, and you see an uplift in direct traffic. So it really depends. Measurement, there are ways to do it within out of home. Obviously, it's going to be different than, say, a paid search campaign. But attribution that's the dirty word for a lot of marketers just from a digital channels, because it's who gets the credit for what. We look at it as out of home should be a complement to digital marketing. It should not be. We would never suggest someone to just take their whole ad budget and put it into out of home. It's a complement, and it's putting your brand in the real world that complements the other activations you're doing. It makes it truly omni-channel. So it really depends on what someone's trying to do, but we start every campaign with asking a lot of questions about what are you trying to accomplish overall in marketing, not just to buy an out-of-home campaign. And we can help craft a strategy that complements that, not just try to sell them a bunch of billboards.
I'll actually give you a real anecdote from a few weeks ago. I was at a dinner and I was chatting with a company. Actually, they probably wouldn't mind me saying it. A company, Vanta, that does all the SOC 2 and compliance automation. They were telling me, I don't know how we got on this topic, but their head of sales was telling me how they were seeing a ton of lift from billboards. And I was like, how do you know? And they're like, oh, we just listened to all the gong calls and we ask on the sales team is typically asking, how'd you hear about us? And when we launched the billboard campaign in, I think it was San Francisco, nearly every call, the first call, the sales team was asking and they were saying, oh, we saw you on the billboard. So that's actually another really interesting way that I'm seeing companies measure attribution now is just listening to calls or using AI at this point to say, take 50 calls and then pull out all the data and give me a percentage. How many times out of these 50 calls was billboards mentioned? 35 times, amazing. That's the primary driver. And so I do think people are now being able to add in some of that qualitative data with more quantitative data, which is cool.
Yeah. First of all, Vanta is an incredible brand from a marketing standpoint, and I'm not sure if you're referring to Stevie, who's an incredible. Their CRO.
Wonderful.
She's incredible. They do an awesome job. I mean, first of all, their creative is excellent. It stands out. They're great at what they do. I've worked in cybersecurity before, so I know that it's an amazing product. But also, they tell a great, compelling story, and and they have fun with it too. I think I know their copywriting is a little cheeky, and they have fun with it. But that's a great point. That anecdotal data that sales gets of saying like, well, how'd you hear about us? Because you can ask that question, and I've done this before. Someone's, oh, I saw you on TV. Well, we don't advertise on TV, but like if you give that as the drop down, someone might pick that. Usually, if it's the first option, they're just going to pick the first option. But through that natural conversation that the salesperson is going to have, they will pick up on that. Like, oh, I saw your billboard. It looked really cool, or it was lit up. Like those types of things that are also factors you have to think about when we recommend an ad campaign. We've had people come to us and say, I want this specific billboard on the 404. I want this one. Well, that one might not be lit up at night, so you're losing 12 hours of exposure there. Or this billboard might look great, but we know there's a tree in front of it, and so we would recommend somewhere else. Or we recommend that the logo on the right hand side, because it's on the right hand side. It's on the right hand side of the throughway versus the left. So those are all kind of considerations you have to think about. But yeah, Vanta does a great job of knowing where their audience spends time, and also making sure the creative is tight. It speaks to the language of what people want to do. I was just at a marketing conference, and I was explaining to somebody what we do and how we do it. And they actually had, the person I was speaking to, a product marketer, said, have you seen these ones around Boston? And he had actually taken photos of these billboards because he thought that they stood out, and they were a client of ours. And it was so meta. I'm taking photos of his photos because I'm like, that's so cool, because again, maybe it's just marketers being marketers and geeking out about this stuff, but he's taken pictures of billboards that weren't even his brand, but because he thought they stood out and he thought it was impactful. And that's the kind of cool work that we get to do. So it does. It's a channel that can work in the right instances, but you have to execute it the right way. It's just like any other marketing channel.
I'm excited for us too, because our name is Tofu. We can have so much fun.
Oh my gosh,
I feel like B2B marketing gets so boring, and I keep wanting us to be like, okay, how do we be more fun and playful and spicy and all the things? Any ideas for us?
Yes. Most people don't think about a home as maybe an ABM play. But what we can do, again, based on targeting, based on all the data sources we can pull in, we can say you gave us your top 50 prospect list. We could plot that out, map that out, figure out where the right inventory is, And we can make sure that your brand shows up in front of the decision makers where they are driving to work, where they are driving to, taking their kids to sports or whatever. But back to that experiential thing, like, yeah, tofu, that's such a, like, there's so much to do with that. It's malleable, just like what tofu is. The type of ABM execution where you can do, you wrap a coffee cart. In this instance, maybe you're not giving out coffee, but you're giving out tofu snacks, and you have those strategically placed in front of your top prospects' offices. They're going to talk about that, even if they're just walking in with your wrapped cups, or a little tofu bowl that is speaks to whatever they sell. There's so much play there with just like that sort of street team marketing that falls under the umbrella of out of home. So yeah, like when you can have fun with it, that's when we get excited. When someone's like, let's stretch the boundaries here. When you have a product or when you have a name that you can play off of, and it's got to play on words, even better. So yeah, I think some sort of like experiential marketing play would work, especially at maybe some conferences. We've done that where we'll have a coffee cart, and it gives a sales team. It's super branded. But they have a captive audience that they could speak to somebody and have a conversation with. It doesn't seem transactional. It seems organic and natural. So, there's a lot of play there that could be done with tofu and an actual food product.
I've been trying to, for conferences, we'll have to do it out of the conference, because inside I keep wanting to do like a tofu scramble bar, but it's always at a hotel and they'll never let you. One other idea that I think would be really fun is doing an activation where we have a food truck, and obviously it's wrapped and has all kinds of tofu products, but it could be a competition outside of like, is this tofu or not? So have like a meat product and tofu, and have people blindfolded and have to guess something that's, again, like beyond experiential. And what I mean by that is, I think we talk about experiential being like a wrapped food truck, which is great. But if you involve the audience in it, to me, I think that takes it one step further, where they're going to take photos, they're going to go and share it, that they're going to go and actually be engaged.
And that's a great way, back to the measurement. That's a great way to track activation there. You're going to see how many people tag your brand. You're going to see how many people share that image. But that's a great example of an execution where you're going to get a captive audience paying attention, and it's going to be fun. And, you can make sure maybe there's some element of who you're choosing to maybe do a contest there. But we do a lot of work around events. We definitely work with the local, either municipalities or event locations to make sure, like, what are we allowed to do? Can we put a cart on the sidewalk? Do we have to be across the street? If we wrapped cars or handed stuff out, if we were like doing Uber rides or things like that, we work with the logistics of that. Because the last thing you'd want to do is have a great idea like that and then it get shut down. But I love ideas like that. Like, those stand out so much. You're going to get people talking, and that's just fun. That's a fun way to get people just to kind of learn about your brand subconsciously to some degree.
You said something before too, and that was actually your hook to me originally, was that out of home can be ABM. I'm curious how, I want to double click on that a little bit, but I'm also curious how remote work has changed that, and whether you're even able to do it to the same degree, or if you even have data on which companies are primarily remote versus in office and things like that.
Yes, there are data sources to be able to find some of that. Are you going to 100%? Yeah, 10 years ago would be very different from now, where you're going to have people that are in or out of office. But even if a percentage of the workforce is maybe not working from a headquarters, having a mobile truck that has that company's brand on it with a unique URL as a call to action on the side, even if you're the CMO, the CFO, the CISO, that maybe like the top person that you want to talk to isn't there in office to see it, somebody else will be when they're walking out, one of their coworkers or 10 of their coworkers, as they're walking out for lunch, they're going to see that. That's intriguing. You're wondering, like, why do I have it? What's that URL with our name on it? Like, what's that landing page? I want to go and see that. They're going to share that with the rest of their company. So even if their coworker and your ICP, your buying committee, maybe not all of them are in that office. They're going to share that internally with them. So that is one execution. That's one way to do it. There are sources you can find to feel more confident to say, yes, we know that it's, primarily they're in office Tuesday through Thursday, for example. But there's also, there's public data out there to know where people live. And it's not to say you're going to be creepy about it, but you can probably, you can make some estimated bets on where executives may be traveling. So again, here's the path from to the office, or things like, conference may not be a true ABM play, but we can use data sources to understand in past years, people have flown in from maybe say more Atlanta than a different city. And we know that they're going to come into baggage claim A versus B based on the airlines they're going to take. So we're going to help you wrap baggage claim A, because the last thing we want to do is you have your awesome branding in the wrong place and nobody sees it. So the data really tells a story. And for us, that's the differentiator, is really honing in on where are the right locations, what is the right mix of inventory, and then the creative part, comes into play there. But it's really like, we're going to help put your brand in the right place, be that an ABM campaign with, billboards on streets on the way to the office, or like I said, an ABM truck or a wrapped truck that we know there's 10 of your prospects that live in one city. We can knock that out in 1 or 2 days, and you're going to get really great exposure from that. And we could track that landing page to see how many people actually visit it, and then let you know that.
That was such a good example, the airport thing, just because my brain doesn't even get that detailed in terms of how many steps down you're thinking to really getting the right thing in front of the right audience at the right time. So that's so cool. I love that. That just kind of opened up my brain to so many different things. Also, we should run some kind of a test together, because what Tofu can do, especially for the ABM plays, is, let's say there's 10 prospects in a city and you want to really get in front of them. Depending on if you have a QR code or something, we can go and show them different content. So now they're going to see custom content on all that stuff. So really pairing the digital and the physical together.
I love that, because that's like, to that point around, the placement's one thing, but to tell the story so that someone feels like, oh, you're speaking directly to me, I want to know more. I love that, because like, if you can pair those two things up, I don't know how that's not going to succeed. So yeah, we'd love to try something like that. We probably have a few clients that would be very interested in that.
That would be fun. I also wanted to get your take on, what are some of the best campaigns you've either, it doesn't have to be with OneScreen, but what are the best out of home campaigns in your mind that you've seen run?
Oh, that's a great question. The ramp one I talked about was pretty cool, because logistically that took a lot of work behind the scenes. Like, I always love the iceberg analogy for things, and that's like, there's a lot under the iceberg, but it executed well. It was just cool, and they do a great job with their brand. So it was really cool. I think there's been some really interesting activations at events. When you think of like, I'm trying to think of a really good example. That's a tough question to kind of back into maybe one or two, but I think ones that just push the needle. I think that.
Last question I have, I know we're about at time, but what are some things people do poorly when it comes to at home? What are some pitfalls or things to avoid?
Yes, that's a really good question. I think a lot of, for marketers that have never run out of home before, they usually don't know where to start, and a lot of times they might go directly to a large vendor, which is okay. We work with large vendors. We work with all the vendors that are really out there. But by doing so, you're going to limit yourself with inventory, because you're only going to have the availability of what they have to offer. And that might only include billboards, but that might not include smaller poster inventory or transit inventory. So understanding the inventory is one thing. Honing in on maybe just like, yes, we need to be in this location. This is where data comes into play. You might think you need to be in Chicago or New York City or San Francisco, but the data might tell a different story. We might be able to help identify a second tier city or two of them that have a high concentration of your prospects. Well, we can run a much longer campaign for you in those types of cities than, say, New York's and LA's are expensive. Other cities might not be, and you could run for twice as long. So I think being open-minded is important to understand, and really, like I said, trusting the data to know where the right applications are. And then trying not to do too much and say too much, because on a billboard or creative, you get a few seconds, or maybe a transit ad's different. Someone's standing there waiting for a bus, you have more time to tell a story. But on a billboard, you don't want 20, you want 6-7 words at max, and maybe a call to action that's really memorable. You don't want it to be .com////. Nobody's going to remember that. So being simple, and simple's hard sometimes for marketers, but you want to be simple with the creative. You want to find the right locations, and you want to trust the data to know that it's giving you the best opportunity to tell your story in the right place.
I love that. And you, honestly, this conversation has just got my wheels turning on all fun things we can and should be doing for out of home. So thank you, Charlie, for joining. Very fun. And for people to learn more, where should they go?
Yeah, check us out at OneScreen.ai. A lot of information there about out of home. I'm active on LinkedIn, so please connect with me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. But yeah, OneScreen.ai. This is what we do out of home, so we enjoy it, and we like chatting about it. So thanks for having me. This has been great.
Awesome. Until next time, see everybody later.